Okay, so when you hear the words Silk Road, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably these huge caravans, right? Loaded with silk, spices, all sorts of treasures, trekking across these vast landscapes. But that's only half the story. The real magic isn't just in the goods, it's in the incredible network that made it all possible. Let's get into it. At its heart, the Silk Road was all about people. Its lifeblood was this constant river of merchants, sure, but also pilgrims, scholars, diplomats, all making these unbelievably long and often dangerous journeys. The entire system, everything we associate with the Silk Road, it all hinged on them. So that brings up a massive question, right? If you're traveling for months across deserts and over mountains, where do you stop? How do you stay safe? How do you actually do business or, just connect with other human beings? Well, the answer was a brilliant and absolutely essential piece of infrastructure. And that answer is the caravanserai. Now, just listen to the name. It comes from Persian words that literally mean caravan palace. And that tells you everything. These were not just some dusty roadside inns. They were basically fortified, full-service hubs that formed the very backbone of the Silk Road. So to really get how important these places were, we're going to break it down into three main parts. We'll look at how they fueled the economy, how they became these amazing social hubs, and, maybe most importantly, how they became the places where world-changing ideas were exchanged. All right, first up, let's follow the money. Because honestly, without the caravanserai, the kind of trade we saw on the Silk Road just wouldn't have been possible. They were the economic lifeline, plain and simple. And the logic behind the whole system is just genius. See, caravanserais weren't just built randomly. They were strategically placed about a day's journey apart, somewhere around 30 to 40 kilometers. This created this predictable, reliable chain of safe havens. It turned what could have been a deadly, chaotic trek into a manageable, stage-by-stage journey. So what did they actually do? Well, they were the absolute pillars of commerce. They offered secure shelter, which was huge. It massively cut down on the risk of being robbed by bandits. They acted as warehouses and even local markets. And they were critical for what's called relay trade. Most merchants didn't travel the entire route, so these inns were the vital exchange points where they'd sell their goods to the next person in the chain. And check this out. This shows you just how seriously governments took this. Rulers, like the Seljuk sultans, knew that investing in these inns was investing in their own economy. They didn't just build them, they essentially created a state-sponsored insurance policy, paying back merchants who got robbed. Talk about creating a secure business environment. Okay, so we've got the flow of goods and money, but now let's talk about the flow of people. Because these places were way more than just commercial stops. They were these buzzing, vibrant social hubs where the entire world of the Silk Road came together. I mean, just try to picture it. Inside the walls of one caravanserai on any given night, you'd find a wild mix of people. Of course, you had merchants, but you also had religious pilgrims, official diplomats carrying messages between empires, scholars searching for ancient texts, soldiers, artisans. It was truly a crossroads of humanity. And you have to remember, for every single one of these people, the road was a place of constant risk. You had brutal weather, bandits, just pure exhaustion. But the caravanserai, that was the solution. It was a guaranteed sanctuary, a pocket of safety and community right in the middle of nowhere. And just look at the services they offered. This is incredible. We're talking food and water, of course, but get this, lodging was often free for the first 3 days. They had doctors for the people and vets for the animals, which were priceless. They had bathhouses, blacksmiths for repairs, and even prayer rooms or mosques. These weren't motels. They were more like tiny, self-sufficient towns. And all of this brings us to what might be their most powerful legacy. Because when you get that many different people from that many different places together in one safe spot, it's not just stories and goods they start to share. They start to share their entire worlds. This table really captures the two sides of the coin perfectly. On one side, you've got the tangible stuff, the silk, the spices, the paper being traded. But look at the other side. This is the intangible exchange. And you could argue it was way more important. Entire religions, like Buddhism and Islam, spread along these routes, carried from one caravanserai to the next. You can seriously think of these inns as the information superhighway of the ancient world. They were communication hubs where merchants would swap crucial tips about market prices or which routes were safe. But on a much bigger scale, this is how game-changing technologies like papermaking, the compass, and gunpowder made their way from east to west. So the process itself was really simple, but incredibly powerful. You can break it down into 3 steps. First, people from all over the known world would gather in this shared space. Second, they'd interact. They'd share a meal, argue about philosophy, teach each other new words. And third, they would disseminate those new ideas, packing them up with their merchandise and carrying them down the road to the next stop, where the whole cycle would start all over again. So, what's the big takeaway here? When you add it all up, the legacy of the caravanserai is so much bigger than the stone ruins that are left today. They weren't just rest stops. They were the very engine of the Silk Road. They were the economic infrastructure that made the whole thing profitable, the social network that connected a fragmented world, and the cultural crucibles that literally blended civilizations together. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. These ancient hubs kick-started this massive global exchange that really did shape the world we live in. So you have to wonder, how different would our cultures, our technology, even our beliefs be today if these vital crossroads had never existed?